The moment Tobias Sullivan saw the lawyer's letter, he knew his bachelor days were numbered, though not for any reason he had ever imagined. The paper trembled in his weathered hands as he stood on the porch of his ranch house outside Red Cloud, Nebraska. The autumn wind of 1882, carrying the scent of dry grass and impending change across the sprawling acres his father had died to secure. The words were stark and unforgiving. According to a newly unearthed territorial law from before Nebraska's statehood, any landholding over 500 acres required the owner to be married and actively working toward establishing a family. Without a wife within 60 days, his land would revert to territorial trust and be parceled out to married settlers. 20 years, his father had worked this land. 10 years Tobias himself had poured his sweat and blood into every fence post, every head of cattle, every dawn breaking over the eastern plains. And now some dusty law from 1855 threatened to strip it all away because he had chosen cattle over courting. Tobias was 31 years old, built solid from years of ranch work, with sandy hair that never quite laid flat and gray eyes that had seen too many hard winters. He had never wanted for female company in town, but marriage had always seemed like something for later, for someday, for when the ranch was more secure. The irony burned like bad whiskey. He rode into Red Cloud the next morning, the small town busy with its usual commerce along Main Street. The bank, the general store, the hotel, all stood as they had for years, familiar and now somehow fragile. Everything he knew could change if he did not find a solution. The lawyer, a thin man named Pemberton with spectacles that kept sliding down his nose, offered no comfort. "I have researched thoroughly, Mr. Sullivan. The law is clear and unfortunately still binding. Marriage within 60 days or the land goes to settlement." Pemberton shuffled papers on his desk, not meeting Tobias's eyes. "I am sorry. If your father had known, I am certain he would have arranged things differently. My father died when I was 21. I have been running that ranch for 10 years on my own." Tobias kept his voice level, though anger simmered beneath every word. "I understand your frustration. Perhaps you have a sweetheart somewhere. 60 days is time enough for a courtship, if the lady is amenable." Tobias left the office with no answers and a growing desperation that felt foreign and uncomfortable. He was not a desperate man. He made decisions based on logic, on what the land needed, on practical matters. But there was nothing practical about this. He was drinking coffee in the hotel restaurant, trying to formulate some kind of plan, when he overheard two women talking at the next table. Their voices carried clearly in the quiet afternoon lull. "I heard the Thornton girl is working at the dress shop now," one woman said, her tone dripping with disapproval. "After all that scandal, you would think she would have the decency to leave town. What choice does the poor thing have? Her father gambled away everything before he died. She has no family, no prospects. No decent man will have her now, not after her engagement ended so publicly." Tobias turned slightly, catching sight of the woman they discussed through the shop window across the street. She was arranging a display of fabric, her movements precise and economical. Even from this distance, he could see she was young, perhaps mid-20s, with dark hair pulled back in a simple style. Her face was serious, focused on her work. "Deborah Thornton," the first woman continued. "Such a shame. She was so accomplished, played piano beautifully. But her father's debts ruined everything. And then that business with the banker's son calling off their wedding just 3 days before the ceremony. Humiliation like that does not wash away easily." An idea began forming in Tobias's mind, cold and practical at first, but an idea nonetheless. A woman with no prospects, A man who needed a wife. Perhaps they could help each other. He paid for his coffee and crossed the street to the dress shop. A bell chimed as he entered, and the woman looked up from her work. Up close, she was prettier than he had first thought, with dark eyes that held intelligence and wariness in equal measure. She was slender, almost too thin, as if she had been skipping meals. "May I help you, sir?" Her voice was cultured, refined, out of place in a frontier dress shop. "Are you Miss Deborah Thornton?" Her expression shuddered immediately, becoming carefully blank. "I am. If you have come to discuss my father's debts, I have already explained to everyone that I have no means to pay them. I am working to settle what I can, but it will take time. I am not here about debts." Tobias removed his hat, suddenly aware of how strange this conversation was about to become. "My name is Tobias Sullivan. I own a ranch outside town. I have a proposition for you if you would be willing to hear it." Suspicion flickered across her face. "What kind of proposition?" "The respectable kind. I need a wife, for legal reasons concerning my land. You need security and a fresh start. I am proposing a marriage of convenience." For a long moment she simply stared at him. Then, to his surprise, she laughed, though there was no humor in it. "You are serious?" "Completely. I know this is unusual, but please hear me out. I have a good ranch, profitable and well-maintained. I can provide you with a home, security, and your own space. I would not expect anything beyond the legal formality of marriage. You would have your own room, your own life. In exchange, you would help me keep my land." "Why me?" Her directness caught him off guard. "Because I heard you are in difficult circumstances, and I thought perhaps we could help each other. I am not a romantic man, Miss Thornton. I am a practical one. This would be a business arrangement, nothing more." Deborah turned away, her hands gripping the edge of the counter. He could see tension in her shoulders, the rapid rise and fall of her breathing. When she spoke again, her voice was quiet. "You know nothing about me except gossip. I know you have been dealt an unfair hand. So have I. We could make the best of bad situations together." She turned back to face him, and he saw something fierce and proud in her expression, despite her circumstances. "If I agreed to this insanity, I would need your word that you would treat me with respect. I will not be mistreated or taken advantage of. You have my word." "I would draw up a contract if you wished, outlining everything clearly." "When would this marriage take place?" "Soon. I have 60 days to comply with the law, but sooner would ease my mind." Deborah closed her eyes, and he saw her throat work as she swallowed. "I need to think about this." "Where can I send word to you?" "The Sullivan Ranch, 5 miles east of town. The main road." He placed his hat back on his head. "I know this is a great deal to consider. Take the time you need. But Miss Thornton, I promise you, if you agree, I will do right by you." He left the shop feeling strange, as if he had just set something in motion that he did not fully understand. The practical part of his mind said this was a good solution. The part of him that sounded disturbingly like his mother's voice wondered what he was doing proposing marriage to a complete stranger. 3 days passed with no word. Tobias threw himself into ranch work, repairing fences and checking cattle, anything to keep his mind occupied. His foreman, an older man named Pete who had worked for his father, watched him with knowing eyes. "You are working yourself ragged, boss," Pete observed on the 3rd evening. "Something eating at you." Tobias told him about the law, about his proposal to Deborah Thornton. Pete listened without interruption, then spat tobacco juice into the dirt. "Well, I will be. That is a hell of a situation." Pete scratched his gray beard. "The Thornton girl, though, I knew her father. Weak man, but she always seemed to have more spine. Helped her mother run their household when the old man was drunk or gambling. Mother died about 5 years back. Girl has had it rough. Do you think I am crazy? I think you are doing what you have to do to keep this land. But Tobias, marriage is not something to take lightly, even if it starts as business. People change. Situations change. You might want to consider what happens after you satisfy this fool law. On the fourth day, a boy from town rode out with a letter. Tobias recognized the neat handwriting immediately, though he had only seen Deborah write her name when he had left his address. The letter was brief and to the point. Mr. Sullivan, I have considered your proposal carefully. I accept your terms, with the condition that we do indeed draw up a contract outlining expectations and arrangements. I will not be made a fool of again, and I require assurances in writing. If this is acceptable, please call on me at the dress shop tomorrow at 2 o'clock. Respectfully, Deborah Thornton. Tobias read the letter 3 times, relief and apprehension warring in his chest. He had a solution to his problem. So why did he feel like he was stepping off a cliff? He rode into town the next day, wearing his best shirt and jacket, his hair tamed as much as it ever got. The dress shop was quiet when he arrived, and Deborah met him at the door, a shawl around her shoulders. "Shall we walk?" she suggested. "I would rather not discuss this where others might overhear." They walked to the edge of town, where the buildings gave way to open prairie. The October air was crisp, and Deborah pulled her shawl tighter. Up close in daylight, Tobias found himself noticing details. The way she held herself with rigid dignity despite her worn dress, the intelligence in her dark eyes, the faint shadows beneath them that spoke of too many sleepless nights. "I have drafted some basic terms," he said, pulling a folded paper from his jacket. "I thought we could discuss them and make changes as needed." She took the paper and read carefully. Her eyebrows rose slightly at some points, but she said nothing until she finished. "You are offering me a great deal of autonomy. As I said, this is a practical arrangement. You will be my wife-in-law, but I have no intention of making you miserable. The ranch house is large enough for privacy. You will have your own space, your own funds for personal needs. In social situations, we will present as a married couple, but at home, you are free to live as you choose. And if either of us wishes to leave the arrangement, after the legal requirement is satisfied," Tobias had thought about this. "After 2 years, if you wish to leave, I will provide you with enough money to start fresh wherever you choose, no questions asked. 2 years is a long time." "It is. But it gives us both security. Me for my land, you for a stable situation. 2 years from now, you will have options you do not have today." Deborah was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the prairie grass bending in the wind. "Very well. I have a condition of my own to add. I will not be idle. I want to contribute to the household. I can cook, keep books, manage a household. I will not be decorative furniture." "Agreed. In fact, I could use help with the ranch accounts. My bookkeeping is passable but not excellent." She looked at him then, really looked at him, as if trying to see beneath the surface. "Why are you being so fair about this? You hold all the power in this situation." "Because my mother raised me to treat people decently, and because you are doing me a considerable favor by agreeing to this at all. I may need a wife to keep my land, but that does not mean I have to be a poor husband to get one." Something softened in her expression, just slightly. "When did you want to marry?" "As soon as possible. This week, if you are willing." "This week?" She laughed that humorless laugh again. "I suppose there is no point in a long engagement. Very well, Mr. Sullivan, let us be practical together." They were married 4 days later in a brief ceremony at the church, with Pete and the minister's wife as witnesses. Deborah wore a simple blue dress that she had borrowed from the woman who owned the dress shop, the closest thing to a wedding dress she could manage on no notice. Tobias wore his Sunday best and felt like a fraud standing at the altar. entering into holy matrimony for the sake of a land deed. But when Deborah placed her hand in his and spoke her vows in a clear, steady voice, something unexpected happened. He felt the weight of responsibility settle onto his shoulders, different from the responsibility of the ranch. This was a person now, a woman who had trusted him enough to tie her life to his, even temporarily. He made a silent promise to himself that he would honor that trust. The wedding dinner was a quiet affair at the hotel restaurant. Deborah ate sparingly, and Tobias found himself watching her, wondering what she was thinking. Her face gave away little, that careful blankness she seemed to wear like armor. "Are you nervous?" he asked finally. "About coming to the ranch?" "Yes," she admitted. "But I have been nervous for months now, since my father died and the debts came to light. This is simply a different kind of nervous. I will have Pete help move your things tomorrow. For tonight, I have arranged a room for you here at the hotel so you have time to adjust. I did not want to rush you." Surprise flickered across her face. "That was thoughtful, thank you." He left her at the hotel and rode back to the ranch alone as the sun set, his new wife a stranger in a hotel room, their marriage certificate folded in his jacket pocket. The whole situation felt surreal, like something happening to someone else. Pete was waiting on the porch, a bottle of whiskey in hand. "How did it go?" "We are married. She will come to the ranch tomorrow." Pete poured 2 glasses and handed one to Tobias. "To practical solutions and unexpected futures." They drank in silence, and Tobias wondered what the hell he had just done. The next day, Deborah arrived with her possessions packed into 3 small crates and 1 worn trunk. Everything she owned in the world fit into Pete's wagon with room to spare. The sight of it made something twist in Tobias's chest, anger at her dead father for leaving her in such straits, and something else he could not quite name. He showed her through the house, a sturdy structure his father had built room by room over the years. There was a main living area with a stone fireplace, a kitchen with a good stove, 3 bedrooms, and a study that Tobias used for ranch business. "This room would be yours," he said, opening the door to the largest bedroom. It had a bed, a wardrobe, a washstand, and a window that looked east over the prairie. "It has a lock on the door if you want privacy." Deborah walked into the room slowly, running her hand over the quilt on the bed. "It is larger than any room I have had before. The house is yours as much as mine now. Make whatever changes you like." She turned to face him. "Where is your room?" "Across the hall. The 3rd bedroom is storage mostly, but we can clear it if you need the space for anything." "This will be more than adequate." She paused. "Tobias, I want to thank you. I know this arrangement benefits you, but you have been kinder about it than you needed to be. We are partners in this, Deborah. Strange partners, maybe, but partners nonetheless." Over the next few weeks, they settled into an odd but functional rhythm. Deborah took over the household management with quiet efficiency, and Tobias quickly realized she had understated her abilities. The house became more organized. Meals appeared with regularity and were surprisingly good. And when she took over the ranch books, she found 3 errors in his accounting that had been costing him money. "You have been paying twice for feed delivery," she said one evening, showing him the ledgers in the study. "See here and here. 2 invoices for the same delivery, different dates." Tobias leaned over her shoulder to look, catching the faint scent of lavender soap. "I will be damned. Good catch." She continued working as if unaware of his proximity. "I have also been reviewing your contracts with the cattle buyers. I think you could negotiate better terms, especially for your premium stock. You understand cattle trading. I understand numbers and negotiation. My father may have been terrible with money, but before he deteriorated completely, he taught me basic business principles. I helped manage our household accounts from the time I was 16. How old are you now, if you do not mind my asking? 24. And you are? 31. I suppose we should know basic things like that about each other. She looked up at him then, and for the first time he saw the hint of a smile. I suppose we should. What is your favorite color? The question was so unexpected that he laughed. I have never given it much thought. Green, maybe. The color of good pasture grass. Yours? Blue, the color of the sky just after dawn. She returned her attention to the ledgers. We can work on getting to know each other as we go. We have time. But time, Tobias was discovering, was a strange thing. The days developed a pattern. He would rise early and handle morning ranch work. Deborah would have breakfast ready when he came in. They would eat together, discussing the day's plans with the polite formality of business associates. He would work through the afternoon and she would manage the house, tend the garden she had started, and work on the books. Evenings, they would eat dinner together, sometimes talking, sometimes in comfortable silence. Then they would retire to their separate rooms. It was all very practical and civilized, and it should have satisfied Tobias completely. Instead, he found himself increasingly aware of her presence. The way she hummed softly while cooking. How she would stand on the porch in the evenings, watching the sunset with an expression of longing that made him wonder what she was thinking. The rare sound of her genuine laugh when one of the ranch hands told a particularly bad joke. A month into their marriage, they had their first real conversation that went beyond household business. It was a Sunday, and neither of them had work that demanded immediate attention. Deborah was reading on the porch, and Tobias found himself joining her instead of finding some task to occupy himself. "What are you reading?" he asked, settling into the chair beside her. She showed him the cover. "Poetry. Whitman. I found it on your bookshelf. I hope you do not mind." It was my mother's. She loved poetry, read it to me when I was young, though I never had much patience for it. What happened to her, if I may ask? Fever took her when I was 17. My father followed her 8 years later. Heart gave out during a hard winter. He paused. What about your mother? Consumption. She fought it for 2 years before it finally took her. My father fell apart after that. The gambling got worse, the drinking. I tried to hold things together, but I was young and he was determined to destroy himself. When he died last year, I felt more relief than grief, which is a terrible thing to admit. Not so terrible. He left you to clean up his mess. Yes, he did. She closed the book. Do you ever resent this situation, being forced to marry because of some archaic law? Sometimes. But then I think about losing the ranch, losing everything my parents built, and I know I would have done far worse things to prevent that. Do you resent it? I resent my father for putting me in a position where marrying a stranger seemed like the best option. But the marriage itself, no. You have been honorable. That is more than I had any right to expect. Something in her tone made him look at her more closely. The banker's son who called off your engagement. He was not honorable. Her laugh was bitter. Richard was many things, but honorable was not among them. He proposed when my father was still alive, and our family had social standing. When the debts came to light, and it became clear there would be no dowry, no family connections worth having, he could not run fast enough. He publicly blamed me for misleading him about my circumstances, as if I had somehow hidden my father's gambling and drinking that the whole town knew about. He sounds like a fool. He was practical, just like us. He wanted a wife who would enhance his position, and I could not provide that anymore. She met his eyes. At least you were honest about your motives from the start. There is value in that kind of honesty. For what it is worth, I think he lost more than he knows by breaking that engagement. She studied his face as if searching for mockery, but he meant it. In the month they had been married, he had come to respect her intelligence, her strength, her quiet competence. She deserved better than a man who would abandon her when circumstances changed. "That is kind of you to say," she said finally. As November arrived with cold winds and the threat of early snow, Tobias found his thoughts increasingly occupied by his wife. It was not supposed to be this way. This was a business arrangement, a means to an end. But he caught himself looking forward to dinner conversations, to the way she would bite her lip when concentrating on the account books, to the rare moments when she would relax enough to share a story from her childhood. He was not falling in love. That would be foolish and impractical and completely against the spirit of their arrangement. But he was developing feelings that complicated things, feelings he was not sure what to do with. The first snow came in mid-November, a light dusting that made the prairie look clean and new. Tobias came in from checking on the cattle to find Deborah standing in the doorway, looking out at the white landscape with wonder on her face. "I have always loved the first snow," she said. "It feels like the world is starting over." "It is beautiful," he agreed, though he was looking at her face more than the snow. "But it also means hard winter ahead. We need to make sure we are prepared." Ever practical. But she smiled when she said it, a real smile that reached her eyes. That evening, after dinner, they sat by the fire and talked longer than usual. She told him about learning piano, about the concerts she used to attend with her mother, about her dream of one day seeing the ocean. He told her about growing up on the ranch, about his father teaching him to read the weather and the land, about the time he got lost in a blizzard and spent the night in a cave with his horse. "You must have been terrified," she said. "I was 16 and thought I was invincible. My father, though, when he found me the next day, I saw real fear in his eyes. He did not speak to me for the whole ride home, then hugged me so hard I thought my ribs would crack. He loved you very much. He did. He wanted this ranch to be my future, something solid and lasting. That is why I cannot lose it." Deborah looked into the fire. "I understand that, wanting to honor what your parents built, even after they are gone." The moment felt intimate in a way that had nothing to do with physical proximity. Tobias found himself wanting to reach for her hand to offer comfort or connection, but he held back. They had an agreement. Boundaries were important. Winter deepened, and the ranch work became harder, more focused on survival and maintenance than growth. Tobias would come in from hours in the cold to find the house warm, food ready, and Deborah efficient and organized as always. But there were moments now, small ones, where things felt different. Her hand would brush his when passing a plate. She would laugh at something he said, a genuine sound that made him want to hear it again. Once, when he came in after a particularly brutal day fighting through snow to check the herd, she made him sit by the fire and brought him coffee with her own hands, concern clear on her face. "You are frozen through," she said, frowning. "You should not stay out so long in this weather. The cattle need checking. The cattle will not benefit if their owner freezes to death." She disappeared and returned with a heavy blanket, draping it over his shoulders. The gesture was caring, maternal almost, but it made his heart do something complicated in his chest. "Thank you," he managed. She sat across from him, her own cup of tea in hand. "Tobias, I have been thinking. Our arrangement has been working well, I believe. But I wanted to ask, are you satisfied with how things are going?" The question caught him off guard. "I am. Very much so. You have made the house a home, not just a place I sleep. The books are better managed than they have ever been. I am grateful for all of it. Are you satisfied?" "More than I expected to be," she admitted. "I thought I would feel trapped, but instead I feel safer than I have in years. You have been nothing but kind and respectful. I appreciate that more than you know." "Good. That is good." He hesitated, then decided to risk honesty. I will admit, this arrangement has turned out differently than I anticipated. How so? I expected us to be strangers living under the same roof, but I find I enjoy your company. I look forward to our conversations. You have become a friend, I think. Something shifted in her expression, warming it. I have come to think of you as a friend as well. That is something I did not expect, but I am glad for it. Friends. It was a safe word, a reasonable word for what they were becoming. But as Tobias went to bed that night, he admitted to himself that friendship was not quite the right term for what he was feeling. He was developing an affection for Deborah that went beyond respect or gratitude. She was in his thoughts when he worked, in his awareness when she was near. He found himself wanting to make her smile, to ease the shadows that sometimes filled her eyes. He realized with something like shock, beginning to care for her in ways that had nothing to do with their business arrangement and everything to do with who she was as a person. Christmas approached, and Tobias found himself wanting to do something special, though he was not sure what. Deborah had mentioned missing the holidays as they used to be before her mother died, when there was music and good food and joy in their home. He wanted to give her that, even in some small way. He conspired with Pete to bring in a small pine tree which he set up in the living room. When Deborah saw it, her eyes went wide. "What is this? I thought we should have a proper Christmas." "I know it is not much, but we could decorate it together if you would like." Her eyes glistened with tears, and for a moment he thought he had overstepped. But then she smiled, brilliant and unguarded. "I would like that very much." They spent the evening stringing popcorn and cutting paper decorations, working side by side with an ease that felt natural and right. Deborah told him about Christmases past, and he shared his own memories. The fire crackled. The tree gradually became decorated with their simple ornaments, and Tobias realized he was happier than he had been in years. When they finished, they stood back to admire their work. The tree was not fancy, nothing like what rich families in the city might have, but it was theirs, made together. "It is perfect," Deborah said softly. "Thank you for this, for caring enough to make the effort. You deserve to have good memories again, not just sad ones." She looked up at him, and the distance that usually existed between them seemed to shrink. "Tobias, I need to tell you something. These past months living here, being married to you even in our unusual circumstances, it has been good. Better than good. You have given me back a sense of purpose and stability that I thought I had lost forever. I am grateful, but it is more than gratitude. I have come to care for you." His heart was pounding so hard he thought she must hear it. "I have come to care for you too. More than I planned, more than I thought possible when we started this arrangement." What does that mean for us? It was a fair question, and one he had been asking himself. "I do not know. We have an agreement and I will honor it. If you want to keep things as they are, with the boundaries we established, I will respect that. But if you are willing, I would like to see if we could be more than business partners, more than friends. A real marriage, if that is something you might want." Deborah was quiet for a long moment, and fear crept into Tobias's chest. He had revealed too much, wanted too much, ruined the careful balance they had maintained. But then she reached out and took his hand, the first time she had initiated such contact. Her fingers were warm, delicate but strong, and they fit perfectly in his. "I think I would like that," she said. "To try, at least. To see if what we have built here could become something more. I am scared, I will admit. Richard hurt me badly, and trusting again is not easy. But you have shown me nothing but steadiness and kindness. If I am going to risk my heart again, I cannot think of anyone I would rather risk it with." Tobias lifted her hand and kissed her knuckles gently, a gesture of promise and hope. "I will do everything in my power to be worthy of that trust. And Deborah, I promise you, I will not run when things get difficult. I am in this for as long as you will have me." Her smile was tremulous but real. "Then let us see where this goes." That night, things shifted between them in subtle but significant ways. They did not rush into anything physical beyond that held hand and a chaste kiss goodnight, but the walls that had existed between them began to come down. They were no longer two strangers in a business arrangement. They were two people choosing to build something real together. Christmas morning, Tobias gave Deborah a gift he had commissioned weeks earlier, before he had fully acknowledged his own feelings. It was a music box, small and delicate, that played a gentle waltz. When she opened it, tears spilled down her cheeks. "My mother had one like this," she whispered. "I had to sell it to pay debts." "How did you know?" "You mentioned it once in passing. I thought you should have one again." She set the music box aside carefully and hugged him, the first real embrace they had shared. Tobias wrapped his arms around her, feeling the way she fit against him, and thought that he could happily spend the rest of his life holding this woman. Deborah pulled back enough to look up at him. "I have something for you too." She produced a package wrapped in brown paper. Inside was a new ledger for ranch accounts, but the cover was embossed with his initials in fine leather work. "I know it is practical rather than romantic, but I thought you might like it." "It is perfect. Practical can be romantic when it comes from you." They spent Christmas Day together, cooking a special meal, sitting by their tree, talking about everything and nothing. The physical intimacy would come in time, Tobias knew, as trust deepened and Deborah felt safe. For now, it was enough to sit beside her, to hold her hand, to know that they were building something neither had expected but both were beginning to treasure. As January arrived with bitter cold and heavy snows, Tobias and Deborah continued to grow closer. They moved slowly, carefully, learning each other in layers. She told him about the humiliation of Richard's public rejection, about feeling like she was damaged goods that no one would want. He held her while she cried, offering comfort without expectation, and told her that Richard was a fool who did not deserve her tears. He told her about the loneliness of running the ranch alone, about feeling like he was just going through motions without purpose, beyond survival. She listened and told him that he had built something remarkable, that his parents would be proud, and that he did not have to be alone anymore. One evening in late January, after a day of working together to inventory supplies and plan for spring, they sat by the fire as had become their habit. Deborah was leaning against Tobias's shoulder, his arm around her, a closeness that had developed gradually but felt increasingly natural. "I have been thinking," Deborah said, "about our agreement, the clause about me being able to leave after 2 years." Tobias's chest tightened. "Oh, I do not want that anymore, the option to leave. I want to stay not because of an agreement but because this is where I want to be. With you." Relief flooded through him. "Are you certain? I do not want you to feel obligated." She sat up to look at him directly. "Tobias, somewhere in the past few months I fell in love with you. I did not mean to, I was not looking for it, but it happened anyway. You have shown me what it means to be valued, to be partnered with rather than managed or controlled. I love you and I want this marriage to be real in every sense." His heart felt too large for his chest. "I love you too. I think I have for weeks but was afraid to admit it, afraid I was alone in feeling this way. You are not alone, not anymore." He kissed her then, properly, deeply, pouring months of growing affection and longing into it. She responded with equal passion, her hands tangling in his hair, her body pressing close. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Tobias rested his forehead against hers. "Are you sure about this?" he asked. "I want you to be certain." "I have never been more certain of anything." That night, Deborah moved her things into Tobias's room and their marriage became real in every way. They made love with tenderness and care, taking time to learn each other, to give and receive pleasure. Afterward, holding her close as she slept in his arms, Tobias marveled at how completely his life had transformed. He had married her to keep his land, entered into what he thought would be a cold business arrangement. Instead, he had found love, partnership, and a happiness he had not known was possible. Winter gradually gave way to spring, and with the changing season came new beginnings. The ranch thrived under their joint management, Deborah's business acumen complementing Tobias's knowledge of the land and cattle. They worked side by side, partners in every sense, their love deepening with each passing day. In April, Deborah discovered she was pregnant. She told Tobias over breakfast on a morning when the prairie was green and alive with new growth, wildflowers blooming in patches of color. He was so overcome with joy that he swept her into his arms and spun her around, making her laugh and scold him for being reckless. "I am going to be a father," he kept repeating, wonder in his voice. "We are going to have a child." "Yes, we are." Deborah's smile was radiant. "Are you happy?" "Happy does not begin to cover it. I love you so much, both of you." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through spring and summer. Tobias became almost comically protective, fretting when Deborah did anything more strenuous than light household work. She tolerated his hovering with patient amusement, occasionally reminding him that women had been having babies since the beginning of time, and she was perfectly capable of managing. "I know that," he said one evening, his hand resting on her swelling belly. "But you are not just any woman. You are my wife carrying my child. Let me worry a little." "A little is fine, but if you try to stop me from tending my garden, we will have words." He kissed her temple. "Point taken, but promise me you will be careful, always." In late September, as the leaves began to turn and the air took on an autumn chill, Deborah went into labor. The hours were long and difficult, and Tobias paced outside the bedroom door while the midwife attended to his wife. Every cry of pain made him want to break down the door, to do something, anything, to help. But he could only wait and pray, feeling more helpless than he ever had fighting blizzards or market crashes. Finally, as the sun rose on a new day, the crying of an infant broke through the house. The midwife opened the door, smiling broadly. "You have a son, Mr. Sullivan, strong and healthy, and your wife is doing well." Tobias rushed into the room to find Deborah propped against pillows, exhausted but glowing, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in blankets. She looked up at him with tears streaming down her face. "Look what we made," she whispered. "Our son." Tobias sat carefully on the bed, looking down at the tiny face peeking from the blankets. The baby had dark hair like Deborah, and when he opened his eyes briefly, they were a stormy gray like Tobias's own. He was perfect, absolutely perfect. "What should we name him?" Tobias asked, unable to look away from his son. "I thought perhaps we could name him after your father." "What was his name?" "James Sullivan." "James," Deborah repeated, testing it out. "Jamie, I like that. Jamie Sullivan." "It is perfect. He is perfect. You are perfect." Tobias kissed his wife, then placed a gentle kiss on his son's forehead. "I love you both more than life itself." The months that followed were exhausting, but filled with a joy Tobias had never imagined. He would wake in the night to help with feedings, changing diapers and walking the floor when Jamie was fussy. He taught Deborah how to read the weather and the land, and she taught him how to soothe a colicky baby with patient rocking. They were a team, a family, building a life together one day at a time. On a quiet evening when Jamie was 6 months old, sleeping peacefully in his cradle, Tobias and Deborah sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. She was tucked against his side, his arm around her shoulders, and he felt a contentment so deep it almost scared him. "You remember the day you walked into the dress shop?" Deborah asked. "When you proposed this crazy arrangement?" "I do." "I was desperate and practical and convinced this would be nothing more than a business transaction. I thought you were insane, a stranger proposing marriage for land rights. It sounded like something from a dime novel. And yet you said yes. I did not think I had much choice." My prospects were limited, to put it mildly. She turned to look up at him. "But it turned out to be the best decision I ever made. You gave me everything I thought I had lost. A home, security, purpose. And then you gave me so much more. Love, partnership, a family. I wake up every day grateful that you walked into that shop. I am the grateful one. I set out to save my land and ended up finding the love of my life. Somewhere along the way, I forgot why I even started this. The land is important, yes, but it is meaningless without you and Jamie to share it with. You are my priority now, my reason for everything." "We found each other when we both needed saving," Deborah said. "Two broken people who managed to build something beautiful together." "Not so broken anymore, I think," she smiled. "No, not anymore." The years continued to pass in a rhythm of seasons and growth. Jamie grew into a bright, curious boy with his mother's intelligence and his father's love of the land. When he was 3, Deborah became pregnant again, and this time they welcomed twin daughters they named Sarah and Rose. The ranch house filled with the sounds of children laughing and playing, and Tobias could hardly remember the lonely silence that had once defined his life. Deborah's skill with the ranch accounts helped them weather several difficult years when drought or market fluctuations threatened their stability. She also discovered a talent for breeding horses, developing a small but profitable sideline that became her particular domain. Tobias supported her completely, proud of her accomplishments and grateful for her partnership. They were not without challenges. There were hard times, arguments about money or discipline or the 100 small conflicts that arose in any marriage. But they had learned to communicate, to work through difficulties rather than running from them. The foundation they had built during those early months of careful respect and growing friendship served them well when storms came. As their children grew, Tobias and Deborah made sure to tell them the story of how their parents met. They were honest about the unusual circumstances, the marriage of convenience that became something more. They wanted their children to understand that love could come from unexpected places, that choosing to honor commitments and treat people with respect could lead to blessings beyond imagining. Jamie, when he was 10, asked his father if he regretted the way things happened. "Do you wish you had married Ma the regular way, with courting and all that?" Tobias considered the question seriously. "Our story is unusual, yes, but I would not change it. The way we came together taught me things about love and commitment that I might never have learned otherwise. I learned that love is not just a feeling. It is a choice you make every day to honor and cherish the person you are with. Your mother and I chose each other, kept choosing each other, and that choice became love deeper than anything I could have imagined." On their 10th anniversary, Tobias took Deborah to dinner at the finest restaurant in Red Cloud. It was a rare night away from the children, Pete and his wife watching them back at the ranch. Over candlelight and good wine, they toasted to 10 years of marriage. "Do you ever think about that clause in our original agreement?" Tobias asked. "The one where you could leave after 2 years?" "Sometimes," Deborah admitted. "I think about how naive we both were, thinking we could maintain emotional distance in a marriage, how quickly that fell apart. I think I was halfway in love with you after the first month. I just would not admit it. I fought it longer than you did. I was so scared of being hurt again. But you were patient and kind, and you broke through my defenses without even trying. I am glad I did." These 10 years have been the happiest of my life. You and the children, the life we have built together, it is everything I never knew I needed." Deborah reached across the table to take his hand. "Here is to the next 10 years and the 10 after that, and all the years we have together." "I love you, Tobias Sullivan." "I love you too, Deborah Sullivan. Forever." The years continued to unfold with their mixture of joy and challenge. Jamie grew into a responsible young man who loved the ranch as much as his father did. Sarah showed a talent for music, learning piano from her mother, who had managed to acquire an old upright piano and restore her long-denied love of playing. Rose became fascinated with books and learning, talking constantly about becoming a teacher. Tobias and Deborah supported each of their children's dreams while also making sure they understood the value of the land and the legacy they were part of. The ranch prospered under their continued partnership, becoming one of the most successful operations in the region. On quiet evenings, when the children were occupied and the work was done, Tobias and Deborah would still sit on the porch as they had so many years before, watching the sunset and talking about everything and nothing. The ease between them, the deep comfort of being with someone who knew you completely and loved you anyway, was something they never took for granted. When Tobias was 50 and Deborah was 43, they celebrated 20 years of marriage. Their children, now young adults pursuing their own paths while still connected to the ranch and family, organized a surprise party. Friends and neighbors from all over the county came to celebrate with them. Pete, now retired but still living in a cottage on the ranch property, stood to make a toast. "I remember when Tobias first told me about his plan to marry a stranger to keep his land. I thought he was crazy, but desperate times and all that. What I did not expect was to watch a business arrangement turn into one of the truest love stories I have ever seen. These two people chose each other, kept choosing each other, and built something beautiful from what started as pure necessity. To Tobias and Deborah, may you have many more years of choosing each other." The party went late into the night, filled with music and dancing and laughter. Tobias held Deborah close as they swayed to a waltz, her head resting against his chest, and thought about the journey that had brought them here. "What are you thinking?" Deborah asked softly. "That I am the luckiest man alive. That a dusty old law that should have ruined me instead gave me everything worth having. We were lucky, both of us, but we also worked for this. We chose to make our marriage real, to invest in each other and our family. That takes more than luck. True. It takes love and commitment and stubbornness," she laughed. "Plenty of stubbornness on both sides." As the evening wound down and their guests departed, Tobias and Deborah stood on their porch, looking out over the land that had brought them together. The moon was bright, casting silver light across the prairie, and everything was peaceful. "You know," Deborah said, "I have been thinking about the future, about what happens to all of this when we are gone. The children will inherit, they will carry on what we have built." "Yes, but I was thinking we should write it all down, our story, how we came together, what we have learned, so that future generations will know that even when things seem impossible, love can find a way." "That is a good idea. We can work on it together like we do everything else." "Partners to the end," she said, smiling up at him. "Partners to the end," he agreed, kissing her tenderly. The following years brought grandchildren, a dozen of them eventually, filling the ranch house with new generations of laughter and life. Tobias and Deborah embraced their roles as grandparents with joy, teaching their grandchildren about the land, about family, about the love that had started their legacy. They did write their story, working on it together during quiet winter evenings. It became a treasured family document, passed down through the generations, a reminder that love could come from the most unexpected places, and that choosing commitment over convenience could lead to blessings beyond measure. As they aged, Tobias and Deborah grew even closer, their bond deepening in ways they could never have imagined during those early days of careful formality. They had seen each other through illness and loss, through triumph and failure, and through it all, their love remained constant. When Tobias was 65 and Deborah was 58, they sat on their porch on a summer evening much like so many others. The sun was setting in a blaze of color, the prairie stretching endlessly before them, and the sounds of their family drifted from the house behind them. "Do you remember when you first brought me here?" Deborah asked. "I was so nervous, so uncertain about what I had agreed to. I remember being terrified I had made a terrible mistake, that we would be miserable together. Instead, we found happiness beyond anything I had dreamed possible." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "I love you, Tobias. I have loved you for so long now that I can barely remember what it felt like not to love you. I love you too. You are my heart, my partner, my everything. Marrying you to keep my land was the best decision I ever made, even if I had no idea what I was really choosing at the time." "We chose each other," Deborah said, "and we kept choosing each other every day for all these years. And I will keep choosing you for all the years we have left, however many that may be." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun sank below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. The land stretched before them, fertile and productive, a testament to years of hard work and careful stewardship. But more than the land, more than the ranch or the prosperity they had built, what mattered was sitting beside each other, hands clasped, hearts intertwined. Their love story had started with practicality and desperation, a business arrangement born of necessity. But it had become something far greater, a partnership and romance that had sustained them through decades of life. They had built a family, a legacy, and a love that would endure long after they were gone. As stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Deborah squeezed Tobias's hand. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" "For everything. For taking a chance on a desperate woman in a dress shop. For being patient and kind when you could have been cold and distant. For loving me even when I was afraid to love you back. For giving me a life beyond anything I thought I deserved. You deserved all of it and more. You gave me just as much. You turned a house into a home, a business arrangement into a love story. You gave me children and grandchildren, partnership and joy. I am the one who should be thanking you. Then let us thank each other for all of it, for the life we built together from such unlikely beginnings." "Deal," Tobias said and kissed her softly. The years continued their steady march. Tobias and Deborah eventually handed over the day-to-day running of the ranch to Jamie, who had married a kind woman named Catherine and had children of his own. But even in their later years, they remained involved, offering advice and support while enjoying the slower pace of their days. They traveled some, finally fulfilling Deborah's dream of seeing the ocean. They stood on a California beach, holding hands and watching the waves, marveling at how far they had come from that first awkward conversation in a dress shop. They celebrated 50 years of marriage surrounded by children, grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren. The ranch house overflowed with family, with love, with the legacy they had created together. During the party, their eldest grandson asked Tobias to share the secret of such a long and happy marriage. Tobias looked at Deborah, who smiled encouragingly. "The secret," he said, "is that there is no secret. Marriage is work every day. It is choosing to love even when it is hard. It is respecting your partner, communicating honestly, and being willing to grow together. Your grandmother and I started with nothing but an agreement and a shared need. We built everything else by choosing, every single day, to honor our commitment to each other. Love is not just something that happens to you. It is something you create, nurture, and protect. Deborah added, and marry your best friend if you can. Someone you enjoy talking to, working with, being with. Passion is wonderful, but friendship will carry you through the years when passion ebbs and flows. Your grandfather and I became friends first, then lovers, then partners in every sense. That foundation has held us steady through everything. As the party wound down and the family gradually dispersed, Tobias and Deborah found themselves alone on the porch once more, the place where so many important conversations had happened over the decades. 50 years, Deborah mused. Half a century with you. It has gone by so fast. And yet I feel like I have known you forever, like we were always meant to find each other. Maybe we were. Maybe that old law was not just some dusty regulation, but fate pushing us together. Tobias chuckled. I am not sure I believe in fate, but I am grateful for whatever brought you into my life. Me too. I cannot imagine what my life would have been without you. Empty, I think, lonely. You never would have been lonely. You are too remarkable. You would have found your way. Perhaps. But I am glad I found my way with you. They sat together as the evening deepened, comfortable in the silence that came from decades of companionship. The ranch that had been the catalyst for their marriage hummed with quiet evening sounds, cattle lowing in distant pastures, horses moving in the barn, the whisper of wind through prairie grass. When Tobias was 71, he fell ill with pneumonia during a harsh winter. For days, Deborah sat by his bedside, refusing to leave, holding his hand and willing him to fight. The children and grandchildren gathered, worried, but Deborah remained calm and steady. You do not get to leave me yet, she told him firmly. We have more years together. I am not done with you. Whether it was her determination, the doctor's care, or simple stubbornness, Tobias recovered. When he was finally strong enough to sit up and talk, he pulled Deborah close. I heard you, he said. When I was at my worst, I heard you telling me to fight. I could not leave you, not yet. Good. Because I meant every word. The illness left him weaker, and he was forced to slow down even more. But it also gave them a gift of appreciation, a renewed awareness of how precious their time together was. They spent long afternoons sitting together, reminiscing about their years, talking about their family, simply being present with each other. On a spring morning when Tobias was 74 and Deborah was 67, they took a walk around the ranch, moving slowly but still able to cover the familiar ground. They stopped at the spot where Tobias had first brought her when she arrived as his new wife, nervous and uncertain. Do you remember standing here? He asked. Seeing the ranch for the first time, I do. I was overwhelmed. It was so much bigger, so much more than I expected. I remember thinking that I had stepped into a completely different life. You had, we both had. He turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. I need you to know something, in case I do not have a chance to say it later. My life began the day you walked into it. Everything before was just preparation. You are the love of my life, my partner, my best friend. These 53 years with you have been the greatest gift I could ever receive. Tears spilled down Deborah's cheeks. Do not talk like you are saying goodbye. I am not. I plan to be around to annoy you for many more years. But I wanted you to know, clearly and without question, that you are my everything. You always have been. And you are mine. You saved me, Tobias, in every way a person can be saved. You gave me love and family and purpose. You showed me what it meant to be truly partnered with someone. I love you more now than I did even at the beginning, and I loved you so much then I thought my heart would burst. They held each other in the spring sunshine, two people who had built a lifetime together from the most unlikely beginning. Around them, The land they had worked and loved spread in all directions, fertile and productive, a testament to their care and commitment. That evening, surrounded by family for Sunday dinner as had become tradition, Tobias looked around the table at the faces of his children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. Every one of them was there because he had needed to keep his land and had proposed a desperate arrangement to a woman he did not know. But somewhere along the way, he had forgotten about the land, forgotten about the law that had pushed him into that decision. All that had mattered, all that had ever really mattered, was the woman sitting beside him, her hand in his, her love the foundation of everything good in his life. He had married her to keep his land, but he had fallen so deeply in love that he forgot why he started. And in that forgetting, he had found everything worth remembering. As the sun set on another day, another year, another chapter in their long story together, Tobias and Deborah sat side by side on their porch, hands clasped, hearts full. The land stretched before them, enduring and constant, but it was just land. What mattered, what had always mattered, was the love they had built together, the family they had created, the life they had shared. Their love story had started with practicality, but had become something eternal, something that would live on in the children and grandchildren who carried their legacy forward. They had proven that love could grow from the smallest seeds, that commitment and respect could blossom into passion and devotion, that two strangers could become soulmates if they were willing to put in the work. And as they sat together in the gathering twilight, watching the stars emerge one by one in the vast Nebraska sky, they knew that their story, unlikely and wonderful as it was, had been worth every moment. From desperate beginnings to a love that had spanned more than 5 decades, they had created something beautiful, something lasting, something true. The ranch would endure, passing to new generations who would care for it and build upon what Tobias and Deborah had established. But more than the land, more than any material legacy, what they left behind was the example of their love, a testament to the power of choosing commitment, of honoring vows, of being willing to let unexpected circumstances lead to extraordinary blessings. In the end, the land had been just the beginning. Love had been the destination all along.